Good morning to all of you. We continue today with Kant. We are the 21st of April 2020, and the explanation of the beautiful continues, and we move to a second moment. So if I go with you to page 211, please, let's follow together. From everything that we did last time, we can get a kind of definition that Kant gives us. Explanation of the beautiful, he says, resulting from the first moment is this one. Taste. What is taste? Definition is the faculty of judging of an object or a method of representing it. So we have a faculty to judge an object or a method of representing it by how an entirely disinterested satisfaction or dissatisfaction. The object of such satisfaction is called beautiful. Okay, so now we know we have a faculty of taste. When is this functioning? It is when, as we represent the object, we do it in an entirely disinterested way. We now know what that means. And we have then a satisfaction or a dissatisfaction with the object. If we have a satisfaction with it, it is beautiful, and if not, if there is dissatisfaction, it is not beautiful. We can call it ugly, or just simply can be non-beautiful, more generally. So, taste is the faculty of judging of an object or a method of representing it by an entirely disinterested satisfaction or dissatisfaction. The object of such satisfaction is called beautiful. Second moment, of the judgment of taste as we distinguish it from the judgment of quantity. May I correct myself? It's of the judgment of taste that is in rapport, in connection with the notion of quantity. We're not distinguishing it from quantity. Okay. Section 6 then, the title. The beautiful is that which, apart from concepts, is represented as the object of a universal satisfaction. You remember we already said that we're not dealing with a question of knowledge, and so we are not dealing with a concept. We're not dealing with a question of an action based on a maxim and a certain idea that is then produces a concept, and that concept determines how we do things. So in other words, we are not in morals. So it is not a moral judgment, it is not a judgment of knowledge, it is not a judgment of having an experience of an object and knowing it, cognition, if you like. So beautiful is that which, apart from concepts, is represented as the object of a universal satisfaction. We represent it still as an object, but not following certain concepts, and we consider it as having not just satisfaction for us, but a universal satisfaction. Let's see how he reaches this conclusion. Kant says, this explanation of the beautiful can be derived from the preceding explanation of it as the object of an entirely disinterested satisfaction. Why we say that, of course, is because any kind of interest is personal. So we are then not something universal. Right? I continue. For the fact of which everyone is conscious, that the satisfaction is for him quite disinterested, implies in his judgment a ground of satisfaction for all men. For since it does not rest on any inclination of the subject, nor upon any other premeditated interest, but since the person who judges feels himself quite free as regards the satisfaction which he attaches to the object, he cannot find the ground of the satisfaction in any private conditions connected with his own subject, and hence it must be regarded as grounded on what he can presuppose in every other person. Consequently, he must believe that he has reason for attributing a similar satisfaction to everyone. He will therefore speak of the beautiful as if beauty were a characteristic of the object, and the judgment logical constituting a cognition of the object by the means of concepts of it, although it is only aesthetical and involves merely a reference of the representation of the object to the subject. For it has the similarity to a logical judgment that we can presuppose its validity for all men. But this universality can arise from concepts, as we know, for from concepts there is no transition to the feeling of pleasure or pain, except in pure practical moral laws which bring an interest with them such as is not bound up with the pure judgment of taste. Consequently, the judgment of taste, accompanied with the consciousness of separation from all interest, must claim validity for every man without this universality depending on objects. That is, there must be bound up with it a title to subjective universality. What an interesting, strange term the paragraph ends with. Subjective universality. Let's talk a bit. We know this is basically a consequence of everything we said before. We know that any kind of judgment of taste has to do with satisfaction with an object that is a disinterested satisfaction. Now, what is interested is the contradictory of what is disinterested. So if I am interested in something, this is going to be on a purely personal level, just for me, right? I'm interested in it. I cannot claim that everyone else in the world will be interested in it. If I'm interested in the obtention of chocolate, it's not everyone else in the world who's now going to be interested in the obtention of chocolate. If I'm interested in the money that a work will bring me, a work of art or not, not everyone will be interested, etc. It's something personal. So when we are saying that it's disinterested, we are going into the contradictory of the interested. So it is not something personal. Okay? So when I'm making the judgment then, I'm making a judgment not merely as a personal judgment, but as a judgment that would be valid for all men, since I'm not finding for it a personal satisfaction. This is where the word free comes into play here. What is meant by free is that I am free from any empirical things that come into play, that would come into play into the satisfaction I have. So it's not an interested satisfaction, it's a disinterested satisfaction. It is free from anything private and empirical. Okay. So no private conditions of myself, no private conditions of me as a subject are here imposing themselves. This is free. And so this is why I feel also, or I believe, at least I think, since this is not connected to me only as a person and my own interest, I have reason to think that everyone else would have this satisfaction, because it is not personal, so it's the opposite of just private. It is, in a way, universal. The opposite of individual is universal. In logic, even, the opposite of the singular is the universal. And so this is why we can speak of the beautiful when we are judging, let's suppose, a painting by David, or a painting by Rubens, or a painting, a sculpture by Phidias, etc., etc. I can judge, I will say it is beautiful, as if the object itself is beautiful. Of course, the judgment is subjective. It is very important here, als ob in German, as if. Kant says, I will speak of the beautiful as if beauty were a characteristic of the object. Now be careful, it is not. It is as if. And it is as if the judgment is logical. Okay? So logical would be valid then for everyone, right? But of course he tells us, although this, I can speak of it as if it were a characteristic of the object, the beautiful, and as if that judgment is logical. However, on top of the page, on the right, although it is only aesthetical, based on something beautiful in the sensible world, and involves merely a reference of the representation of the object to the subject. Okay, so it is still an aesthetical judgment that involves just a reference of how the object is represented. So it's not inside the object, right? It's how the object is represented to the subject. Now, it has a similarity to a logical judgment that we can presuppose, he says, its validity for all men. What is this? Because I am making a kind of universal judgment about it, since it is not an interested matter. Now, this doesn't arise from concepts. This universality, tells us, cannot arise from concepts. For from concepts, there is no transition to the feeling of pleasure or pain, except in pure practical laws. Why do we say that? Concepts are always at the level of the understanding, or at the level of the rational level. So concepts do not involve the body. They do not involve how I feel pain and pleasure and so on. The concepts are not aesthetic at the basic level of what's in time and space, that sense of the aesthetics. So the universality I'm speaking about is not that of concepts. So I'm not talking about a concept of triangle, I'm not talking about any kind of mathematical concept or other concepts. So concepts do not have any connection immediately to the feeling of pleasure or pain, except in pure practical laws which involve morals that we won't enter into, okay? So the universality I'm speaking about in my judgment of taste, the judgment of the beautiful, has to do with the satisfaction and has to do with a certain pleasure and pain too. But this is why it is not a question of concepts, okay? Consequently, then, he tells us the judgment of taste, accompanied with the consciousness of separation from all interest, must claim validity for every man without this universality depending on objects. That is, there must be bound up with it a title to subjective universality. Again, it is not in the object itself. I speak of it as if it were in the object, but it is not. This is how the representation of the object to me brings in a satisfaction that is not interested, that is disinterested, and thus universal. So this universality then is not an objective universality in the sense of everyone is going to obtain the same object, because we are not talking here about the object. As we said, there is no interest in the object, but in the representation and the satisfaction that is brought from it. Okay, so we can say then that we are in a subjective judgment, not an objective judgment, and this judgment claims universality. This is what is absolutely new. Why I say this? Because this may appear a bit contradictory to many, and this was debated and how we get to it. Because you know that what is subjective, we always say, has to do with one person. So it's not universal. So notice this particularity here of the judgment of taste. It is at the same time individual, subjective, and the contradictory almost of the subjective, the universal. So it is personal to me, and at the same time it claims a universal consent, that everyone will also think the same. So when I am, and this is where we can debate with Kant, of course, and today people do a lot, when I am looking at a painting by Raphael, let's suppose, for example, or personally I love a very wonderful painter for me from the Renaissance called Masaccio. I love how he uses the colors. So if I look at Masaccio, this is an individual judgment I'm making. I say this is beautiful. For example, the Annunciation, some of the Annunciations made by Masaccio with wonderful yellow colors are things that I'm in love with personally. So I can say that this is individual, but I also, when I come home from Florence to Lebanon, I will speak to all my friends and tell them, you have to see this. This is so beautiful. What am I doing? I'm claiming that anyone else will find this beautiful. I'm claiming a universality of my subjective judgment. This is the particularity also of the judgment of taste. We can understand it now, and you can also agree with it or disagree. We can say, no, this is very culturally bound. Maybe someone from 5 centuries from now will find this ugly. We don't know. Or you can say, personally, I tend to be of the first group, but there is no reason to just be of that first group. To each one his own, in this case, how we reason. I would say no. There's something universal about this that everyone for all time will find as beautiful. This is me. I'll let you be your own judge. And we move on now to the second section, the comparison of the beautiful with the pleasant and the good by means of the above characteristic. There must be bound up with it a title to subjective universality. As regards the pleasant, everyone is content that his judgment, which he bases upon private feeling, and by which he says of an object it pleases him, should be limited merely to his own person. Thus he is quite contented that if he says Canary wine is pleasant, another man may correct his expression and remind him that he ought to say it is pleasant to me. Right? It's like everything else. Well, you may like chocolate and me no. I may find it pleasant and you don't. And this is the case not only as regards the taste of the tongue, the palate, and the throat, but for whatever is pleasant to anyone's eyes and ears. Right? You may like Haifa Wahbi, and I may not. To one, violet color is soft and lovely. To another, it is washed out and dead. One man likes the tone of the wind instruments, another that of strings instruments, right? Guitars and so forth. To strive here with the design of reproving as incorrect another man's judgment, which is different from our own, as if the judgments were logically opposed, would be folly. As regards the pleasant, then, therefore, the fundamental proposition is valid. Everyone has his own taste. So only when it comes to this very vulgar way of speaking, everyone has his own taste, can we speak of the pleasant. So everyone has his own taste, which is bad wording, of course, can be applied only to the pleasant. Kant, of course, continues, the case is quite different with the beautiful. We cannot say in this case that everyone has his own taste. Let's continue. It would, on the contrary, be laughable if a man who imagined anything to his own taste thought to justify himself by saying, this object, the house we see, the coat that person wears, the concert we hear, the poem submitted to our judgment is beautiful for me. For he must not call it beautiful if it merely pleases him. Many things may have for him charm and pleasantness. No one troubles himself at that. But if he gives out anything as beautiful, he supposes in others the same satisfaction. He judges not merely for himself, but for everyone, and speaks of beauty as if it were a property of things. Again, as if. Hence he says the thing is beautiful, and he does not count on the agreement of others with this judgment of satisfaction, because he has found this agreement several times before, but he demands it of them. He blames them if they judge otherwise, and he denies them taste, which he nevertheless requires from them. Here then we cannot say that each man has his own particular taste, for this would be as much as to say that there is no taste whatever, that is to say, it has no aesthetical judgment, which can make a rightful claim upon everyone's assent. Okay, so there is, of course, then no way to say this is only I who finds this beautiful. I can say this is to my liking, this pleases me for Kant, but every time I'm saying something is beautiful, I am seeking an assent from everyone. I am demanding that everyone recognizes it as beautiful. When I see Masaccio as beautiful, I am requiring from you to see also Masaccio as beautiful. Okay? I continue. At the same time, we find as regards the pleasant that there is an agreement among men in their judgments upon it, in regard to which we deny taste to some and attribute it to others, by this not meaning one of our organic senses, but a faculty of judgment in respect of the pleasant generally. Thus we say of a man who knows how to entertain his guests with pleasures of enjoyment for all the senses, so that they are pleased, he has taste. But here the universality is only taken comparatively, and there emerge rules which are only general, like all empirical ones, and not universal, which latter the judgment of taste upon the beautiful undertake or lays claim to it. It is a judgment in reference to sociability so far as the stress on empirical rules. In respect of the good, it is true that judgments make rightful claim to validity for everyone, but the good is represented only by means of a concept, as the object of a universal satisfaction, which is the case neither with the pleasant nor with the beautiful. Okay, I think this is very clear, no need to elaborate too much. So the pleasant can can be spoken of in particular instances as related only to me. I can sometimes generalize certain things, but please never confuse what is general and what is universal. Okay, if I speak of someone who has taste, this is again a vulgar way of speaking, someone who every time he invites us and he invites others makes a good meal. This is not, of course, a judgment of the beautiful. This is something that we say everybody generally would agree with us. It's an empirical judgment, and of course not a universal judgment which demands assent from everyone. Again, this is not a judgment of the good. We've seen that because the good demands a concept, whereas the beautiful is without concept. There is no concept that is the object of universal satisfaction. In the beautiful, it is only in the good. As an example, we can say, for example, the respect or the want of freedom. This is something that leads us to producing by action certain things that lead to freedom. I represent an object and I bring it into existence, and then there's a universal satisfaction about doing this. But this is by means of the concepts that it is done and not without concepts. Okay. Now, another determination, I think we can jump a bit this time. Section 8 says the universality of the satisfaction. Okay, so I'm satisfied, and should be universal, is represented in judgment of taste only, of course, as subjective. Again, it is a subjective satisfaction that I represent to myself, but it has a claim to universality. Okay. Let's go to page 213. And I think we can practically jump a lot here. And go even to page 214 to deal with the fourth moment of the judgment. Okay? And before we read it, we may simply read the conclusion from the second moment. We know the conclusion, I read it for you from the first moment, is taste is the faculty of judging of an object or a method of representing it by an entirely disinterested satisfaction or dissatisfaction. The object of such satisfaction is called beautiful. Now, from the second moment we obtain, the beautiful is that which pleases universally without requiring a concept. Okay? So we have something that pleases us, that we find pleasure in universally. So everyone is to find this pleasure. This is why we demand that everyone thinks something is beautiful when we think it's beautiful, and without, as we saw, requiring a concept. Now the fourth moment is of the judgment of taste according to the modality of the satisfaction in the object. Now, I will leave this actually today. We will finish with it next time and move on to George Dickey. Now, I want to speak to you just a bit take a little bit of time to speak to you. I think we have time to do Dicky, so I want you to please tell me. We may not have time to do, after defining art by Dicky, Dante's text, The End of Art. It's a long text. If you wish us to do both, Dicky and Dante, we can do both. Please answer me. I want to know if you want to do Dicky and Dante or just Dicky. If we decide to also do Dante, what I can do is glean the most important moments. Since it's such a long text, I will just take the main ideas and give them to you in one lecture, 1 or 2 lectures maximum. If not, we can end with Dicky, who will take us next time, and maybe the time after it, 1 or 2 sessions, not more. And then I will leave the rest open for review until we get to our exams. Now, I received the schedule for our exams this spring. So I can give you the date. Your exam will be on the 14th of May. Okay. Now, we are allotted a time slot from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Okay. We are allotted 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. But in fact, we received an email for that. It's 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Since we are reducing the exams, the exam time should not exceed 2 hours. Now, I have created already, if you go, you will see, our Moodle class. Our class is on Moodle. And there's a way to do the exams through Moodle. So on the 14th of May, basically at 5 p.m., I will send you by Moodle the exam, the topic that you have to treat. We'll decide, we haven't decided yet what to include. And I will give you 2 hours. And then, of course, after these 2 hours, if you take more, it will be blocked on Moodle. You will not be able to send the exam. So let's say, of course, 2 hours and a few minutes, but not more. So if you don't send it, of course, then it's not accepted. It's like as if we were together. But of course, we have to limit. This is what we are requested to do, the exam in time. So I'll send you the question. You have 2 hours to answer. So let's say from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. And after that, I will grade, of course, as we usually grade all the exams. Now, from what I understand, you also have the choice of doing pass, non-pass, or taking grade. So I guess this is up to you. On my side, I will grade everything. You will have a grade, and it will be up to you to make this decision. This is what we received as instruction from the president and then from the dean. Okay. Now, this is about the exam. Concerning the distribution of grades, this is also agreed department through the department. So you will have 30% for the first midterm, which we did. 30% for the assignments and 40% on the final. What does this mean? It means that the assignments will be important. I will take all the graded assignments. If we look now, we've got 3 that are graded, and we may stay at 3 or make 4. It's not sure. We may have a 4th assignment. I take all of them and I average them on 30 to make 30% of the final grade. Okay, so it's the average of all the assignments that will be that will constitute 30% of your grade. So you will have, I repeat, 30% the first midterm, 30% the assignments, and 40% the exams. This is how everything is organized, and now you know that you will have to have your exam online. So make sure on the 14th of May at 5 p.m. you are somewhere where you have access to internet. You can receive the assignment from me and write and type it and send it on Moodle. Okay. So we stop here for this time. We will finish Kant next time and move on to Dickey. I wish you all a good couple of days before we meet again Thursday.